All right, so Sage is going to do his review there of Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. This is the remaster or remake, I guess you would say, there of Metal Gear Solid 3. Sage, let us know all about this.
So that's what you say remake remaster. That's what's partially interesting about this is it is almost a little harder to categorize or classify as one or the other compared to many other remakes that we see. Silent Hill or what have you. There's a lot of them. The Resident Evil remakes. A lot of these games really thrive off of kind of reimagining and kind of building this whole new structure from scratch. We did a review for the original not all that long ago over at the Afternoon Tune YouTube channel. You should check that out. And I talked a lot about the story and kind of the just everything that the original game did. And I'm not going to get too into that here because if you've experienced the original game, this is that narrative. The movement of the characters in the cutscenes, the camera angles, the voice acting, it's the same audio recordings from the original. In a lot of ways, this is the same game, and it does feel like a just really, really high grade remaster in many ways. So I don't, I'm not going to touch on like story stuff too much because that's just all the same. It's exactly as you remember it. Other than you can obviously tell from this footage here, very, huge graphical upgrade. It's very impressive. I do think that they make it look great. The like kind of mid 2000s sort of piss filter that a lot of games had, not present here. Although if you miss it, you can kind of go turn it on in the options menu. So it's there if you want it. But what makes this game different or worth experiencing as a new iteration of the game really has more to do with the way it controls, and then there's some of the way it looks, but really it's about the gameplay here. Because the original game, we're really operating off of a gameplay structure that started back on like the MSX, right? The original Metal Gears were these 8-bit top-down games, very overhead thing, and they pretty consistently stuck with that style all the way up to this game. This game was not a third-person shooter, right? I mean, first of all, it's a stealth game. You try not to kill anybody if at all possible. But this game really thrives on having this kind of big camera view, and then this control scheme where like it's. I don't want to say that the control scheme in the original is bad because it's not. I think it's just designed uniquely, but it does create an interesting sense of the controls are balanced in a way to make the game have a certain level of difficulty. Moving around and sneaking, and just the way that you do that is, designed around these what are pretty small areas here. So this remake, remaster, however you want to call it, completely overhauls the controls. Now, if you pick this up and and here's the thing too, you could play legacy mode, which has the controls of the original game. So this game really does give you every option to enjoy it in whatever way you want, which I think is one of the things that's really great about it. But if you pick up the new style here, it's behind your shoulder, right? It looks like, at a first glance at least, more or less the same style of game as Metal Gear Solid 5 was. Now, the interesting effect that has on the game here is it does make it significantly easier. You could probably beat this in maybe half the time it would take to play the original, because they do make some small changes to compensate, but for the most part, these levels are not changed. The geometry of the areas is exactly the same. So if you know where an item is hidden in the original, you know where it's hidden here. If you know what wall to hide behind to avoid an enemy spotting you, you know where that is. That's all the same. Now they have increased the NPC enemies field of vision a little bit. If you were crawling in the grass and the grass moves because you're moving too quickly, they'll notice the grass moving and they'll come check it out, which is, something that is very nice detail compared to like a lot of the very kind of half-assed stealth you get in, let's say, a lot of Ubisoft games where if you're in a bush, nobody's going to notice you, even if your head is sticking out of the top half of it, which often is the case. Here, it's like even if the blades of grass are moving a little too much, they will notice and kind of come check it out. So they do some little things like that to try and kind of make the game balanced still. But I would recommend anybody picking this up. I'd say bump the difficulty up to hard. Just like treat hard like normal for the original, because having this much more fluid, dynamic, and having so much control over everything, it does make the game easier. And there's especially a couple boss fights where I could see the game just genuinely feeling way too easy if you don't bump that difficulty up. Especially the first kind of major boss fight in the game, or actually, I guess second. But the one that's shooting bees at you, that one is you're standing on like a rock. He's standing on a bigger rock. You jump into the water to avoid things, and then you just climb back up and shoot him. And it's something that again was designed around this very particular control scheme the original has, and translated into this new control scheme. I found it like almost absurdly easy. That was even on the harder difficulty. I thought, oh, this is just like a cakewalk. Now, not every boss was that easy. Some of them were relatively quick to deal with. Some of them were not. Some of them still had difficulty in their own different little ways. But this one in particular, I did find was just like, yeah, you could, I mean, you could deal with this in like 2 minutes because
Oh, it seemed like that guy did. I mean, it seemed like he's pretty quick.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it just doesn't. So that is the trade off for the improved and more fluid controls. Is it sometimes can trivialize the game difficulty a little bit. And that's, I mean, I would say my only real big criticism of this, and even that is not like something that was massively getting in the way for me, because like I said, you can bump the difficulty up, and I think that works. Another really cool thing about this remake, something that was not present for me to even talk about when we reviewed the last version, because I was playing off of the HD remaster master collection that was released on the PS4, PS5. But even that iteration of the game is more or less the same version as the HD collection that was on the PS3. Now, what is different about that is you had a few different little mini games in the original that, for licensing purposes, were removed from every version of this game since the PS2. There was a game so the game never actually got made, right? This is a game prototype demo called Guy Savage, and it's like a kind of action game where you're fighting vampires, and never got made. However, in the original game, there is a sequence where if you save your game at a very particular point, you exit the game and then come back in and turn it on, Snake will have a nightmare. And the nightmare you have is playing this concept demo for a game that technically never actually came to exist. So this has been something that's been missing from all iterations of Metal Gear Solid 3. PS3 version, PS4 version, PS5 version, Xbox 360, Xbox One, all versions of that game, this has been removed from. This remake is finally putting this back in. It's not like a huge sequence. You don't spend that much time in it, maybe 5 minutes and it's over. But it is the kind of thing that shows you that the people that were making this do understand the original. They do understand what people appreciated about it. They do get those small details that go into making a masterpiece or a classic kind of what it is. And they made a lot of effort to bring those things back. There's also another mini game that was based off of Ape Escape, which was a big kind of PlayStation 1 franchise. That's something that was also in the original, removed for the PS3, 360, right, HD versions. Here we go, brought that back in too. So there's been, the thing that I think makes this, I would say, a definitive iteration of this game is, and there's from the PS2 version there. This really is taking like whole chunks of this game that have been cut out and removed over time and going like, no. People have been getting an incomplete experience with this. Let's actually put all this stuff back in. We'll remake everything from scratch. We'll build it back in. Cool thing too, for this studio Virtuos that worked on this, they did this part, which is still using the basic structure of the Metal Gear's gameplay, right? But the Guy Savage minigame, they actually contracted Platinum the creators of Bayonetta and the team that did the Metal Gear Rising Revengeance spin-off game. They actually
Mm,
went and got that studio to do the remake of the Guy Savage Nightmare minigame. So that is like this extra layer of like they get why this people care about this, they get what people want from this, and they went the extra mile to include those things because they very easily could have left them out, right? There's been like 4 or 5 releases of this game that have left these things out, but they didn't. They really went in and got every last thing back in here.
mm. Okay, you say you could crank up the difficulty there. How? What are the difficulty options?
So I believe it just goes from like easy, normal, hard, very hard. They do have their own little names, that they call the difficulties. But I think there's a hard and then a very hard. I would say personally, my recommendation is go with hard because I feel like normal can be a little too easy at times. Again, because of the controls. But I mean, also it depends on what you want. If you're just here for the story, you don't want to get like too into the nitty gritty of the gameplay and have to like really get good at it. That's fair enough. But if you are a fan of the original and you pick this up and you're like, wow, this seems easy, yeah, crank it up a little bit to get the same experience because I had to. I know I had to.
Yeah, and this is all the same. So it's the same dialogue, same voice
The
actors.
only thing that is different is there's a little bit of new recorded voice lines for certain parts of the tutorial because the buttons on the controller are a little different nowadays. Start and select, right, have been replaced with, was it share and I don't remember. It's still start and select to me. I'll never let it go. But on the actual controller, they do have these different, labels on them. And there's the PS2 only had 2 triggers, right? It didn't have like the triggers and bumpers we have on controllers now. So there's a little bit of new recorded voice lines, but it's just for that tutorial stuff. Otherwise, it's all the same audio. They literally just took the same archival stuff and they just cleaned it up a little bit and they put it right in here. So that is like all the same. Like you are getting the same story with the same quality of voice acting, and I think that's a smart thing because Metal Gear, I'm sure you remember stuff like the voice acting in the original Resident Evil, right? Uh, Metal Gear was kind of one of the first games to have good voice acting, and I think to not change that, to not re-record it, and to just kind of preserve that as is, I think is actually a really important thing to do.
Mm, okay. Also, and you already mentioned there with the controls there, so you can have the option to play new controls or the old controls if you so choose. You can do that. Keep the old look of the game there as well. Um, So, and you mentioned before, I think even when you were playing the game, you mentioned to me. So, if you're somebody who wants to play this game, you've never played it before, you could just go with this and not go back and play like any of the remastered version. This is just now with the updated controls, the better way it looks. This is the definitive new Metal Gear Solid 3, and you should just play this.
Yeah, I would personally recommend this over any other version if to a newcomer. And sometimes in certain cases, I would maybe say play the original PS2 version first if you can get your hands on it. It'll depend on the person. If you are someone who genuinely likes and appreciates older games and you don't mind going back to kind of a different style, or you don't mind the graphics, hey, Lucky Dog podcast. But it really just depends on personal preference, I guess, in a certain sense. But for the most part, I think especially, yeah, if you don't play older games, you are used to the way new games look and feel, and you just don't have the sort of patience to go back to something older. This is easily recommendable over the HD remastered version. And a big part of why is not only does it look better, not only do the controls feel better, but all those things I said had been cut out of the various versions of the game are all back here. This version of the game is the only version since the original PS2, or at least the subsistence release, which was like a year later, a couple extra things were added. But since the PS2, this is the only version of the game that's actually had every game mode in it or everything actually all in one package. You've been getting basically an incomplete experience with all those remasters.
Mm, okay. I know people like Neo who said, like, well, I've played every version of this game already. There's no real point for me to get this new one because it's the same story and everything like that. So you do have people like Neo who
Yeah,
does,
and that's entirely fair. And what I'll say is that for people like that, if you know the game well and you don't feel a need to revisit it, that's totally fair enough. Maybe don't pick it up or pick it up when it's on sale or something like that. Um, I say this remaster, this is for new people who have never played this game before. And then it's also for like the super fans who have played it 40 times and are going to play it another 40 times. Like
Hmm.
I'm gonna be 80 in the nursing home, and there are gonna be people having to get the controller out of my hands because I'll probably still be revisiting this game.
Mm. Good reviews from critics, so getting good reviews there. Pretty much a lot of 80s. They're out of 100 there. Metacritic, so PC 83 out of 100. PS5, and you played this on a PS5 there.
Yes.
85 out of 100. Xbox there, 83 out of 100. So you did have that as well. You had things like IGN 8 out of 10, GameSpot 9 out of 10 there. I see one review that's interesting here that's highlighted on this Wikipedia page here. I just want to get your thoughts on this. So one of the criticisms of the game, I'm going to talk about, see if you have any criticisms at all of it before you give your final thoughts and review. It says here you have Rolling Stone critic here, Christopher Cruz, who said mostly praised the game but criticized it for adhering too closely to the original, finding that unlike the 2024 remake of the 2001 game Silent Hill 2, Delta doesn't fundamentally change the game or make it feel new. In fact, it feels especially old in ways both good and bad, stating that players' familiarity with the original would determine how much they would enjoy the remake. What do you think about that?
I'd be curious if this person is someone who played the original back then, or if this is like new to them and they're like, oh, it feels kind of old in some ways, and that's why they're saying that, or just exactly what their history with the franchise. I'd be curious to hear maybe that, just kind of get that full context to their perspective. For me, I think it was very important that they basically did not change anything. I think if they had, it would have come across as insulting. Yet, I think a big thing that you have to remember here is Konami treated Hideo Kojima like absolute shit, kicked him out of the company, took his name off of his own work, and now 10 years later is trying to make money off of one of his games. I
Hmm.
think you needed to stick to what that game was without, because if you had started making these changes, and I'm not saying you couldn't make changes and have them be good, but I think you needed to do one game, and I think this is the right game to do it with, where you didn't do any significant changes to prove that Konami was even capable of treating this franchise with respect. Like
Hmm.
they had to earn that goodwill. Now, then when the next remake comes around, which will probably be of the first game, because chronologically that would be where we'd go next. That one, I think, okay, you've proven that you are being respectful towards what this is. Now I don't mind if you maybe make some changes because you've proved that you can do it. But I think for the first one, the first in a revival for the series, I think it was very important that they stuck so close. Now, maybe not everybody's going to agree with that, but I think if you take the full context of the situation and what happened between the creator and the company, I think that was very necessary. And people like me, and I think a lot of other people, if they had made the changes this person wished they made, would have been upset with this game for making those changes.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of remakes, people say, like, a lot of these things, it's like sometimes it adheres too closely, sometimes they make too many changes to it. And then he brought up a great one in Silent Hill 2 there. Do you think it's on par with that in terms of remakes, with something like a Silent Hill 2 or Final Fantasy 7 or any one of those?
I mean, it's very different because those games do, from the ground up are new games. They reinterpret and kind of redo so many things and add new things to the experience. And I love those games for that. I think those games do those. I think both of those franchises did that masterfully with both Final Fantasy 7 and Silent Hill 2. I think the thing that makes Metal Gear Solid just a little bit different is that Hideo Kojima he's considered like one of the few auteurs, right, in video games, right? There's not that many names you hear in a video game and you go like, oh, I know that guy's got a very particular style, or that guy's, what you think of when you think of these games. And I think if it had been something else, then again, I could see the argument perhaps. But just his fingerprint is so on every little piece of this. I think that's another reason why I think it's important to stick close to the original. Remaking Silent Hill 2, it's different because one, you got Masahiro Ito, the creature designer from the original, working on the remake, right? You got
Mm.
Akira Yamaoka, the composer for the original, working on the music for the remake. So you have members of the original team coming and assisting with this experience. And I do believe that there were some members of the old Metal Gear team that did work on this. But when there's such a pronounced name attached to something like this, and you do not have them involved, and you don't even really have him having given any sort of like blessing to do this either, you're just doing it. I think that's where you brush up against this like need to be faithful. Um, I think it just depends on the game, but I think with this in particular, I think you really had to stick close, and I think for that reason, it's on par with those other remakes. But I think it's just a very different situation that this game is in.
Mm. Okay. So, what would be your final thoughts rating for Metal Gear Solid?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a huge fan, total fanboy of this game. So, I mean, I was going to enjoy it most likely. I will say some performance issues, some slowdown, some frame rate stuff that I think is a little hard to excuse considering it's how old the game is and that they are sticking so close. So that's one criticism, is that I think the game at times should be running a little bit better, and I think that that is something that really I don't really get how you could not have it kind of at peak performance when it is effectively a PS2 game. And like I said, I think the change in controls, it does trivialize the difficulty of the game design a little bit in ways that sometimes make it too easy. You can compensate for that, but it's there. So I do have some criticisms of it. It's not the perfect remake in every single possible way that has absolutely no flaws or anything like that. But I think the underlying game that this is still so good that I'm going to give it a peek. I would have given it the This Is Cinema if they maybe fine tuned the difficulty in maybe just a few more ways, and if it launched without any of the performance problems. Because again, some of the frame rate stuff I think is like, come on, guys, there's really no excuse to have that sort of problem in a game like this.
Okay. So, now that this is out, do you see any need to go back and play the original version of it?
Not for newcomers, at least. I think that there's going to be a
Well, I'm just
certain
mean for you personally. Are
for
you
me
going to go?
personally. Hmm, it's a good question. I mean, yeah. Honestly, it probably does kind of replace the original for me because it sticks so close.
Okay.
Um, because you can choose the old control style. I would be surprised if I end up going and back to the old version for any reason other than maybe just a nostalgia hit. That would kind of be it. But at the same time, this kind of has all the nostalgia in it already. So yeah, I mean, I for me personally, it does kind of replace the original.
Okay. So, all right. So there you go. I wonder if that's heresy. Is that all to the Metal Gear fanboys?
I mean, there's definitely a level of fanboy that will never be happy with anything, that will call this that I have absolutely seen say this is terrible and they changed too. That's the thing. There are people saying they did change too much and it's not close enough, and I'm like, how could you even get closer? So that's out there. That's definitely a thing. Um, I think that's nitpicking to nitpick and just looking for problems where there aren't any, but that's just me.
Mm. What last question. What next Metal Gear game do you want to see get remade?
So I think there's two things I would go with. Either Metal Gear Solid 1, which is a PlayStation 1 game, and that is one where you would start to need to redesign the game a little bit more. You can still keep the structure mostly intact, but that one is going to need more changes than this, right? Like you are going to fundamentally have to alter that a little bit more. But I think the really interesting experiment would actually be to take Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 and see if you could and see if you can remake those. Because Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 are 8-bit, like top down, you know, basically original Nintendo games that have no voice acting, and the little dialogue there is in a box with a little picture of a face in the corner. And really significant and important moments in like the story of the overall franchise happen in those two games. And yet they're they're
This is the
accessible.
right one, right?
Yep, that's Metal Gear Solid 1 from the PlayStation 1. But if they went back and did Metal Gear 1 and Metal Gear
Nice.
2, which is that's like straight up 8-bit, right? Like
Let me
that's
try to
that's
see that one.
old school. That stuff was coming out in the 1980s. Those games, now you'd have to completely from scratch reimagine them entirely. And that would be a really interesting challenge. Um
Hmm.
Now I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I feel like Metal Gear Solid would be the safer bet to try and do because I think you could leave more of it intact, but it would still need more updating than this. But yeah, there you go. Now this, if you were to remake take this the basic idea of the story in this game but really create a ground up new game. I think that is honestly what I would maybe be the most interested in seeing because it would take the most genuine originality and creativity to update this to be a modern game out of anything in the franchise.
Mm, okay, so there you go. There's some suggestions from Sage there, of which Metal Gear game they should do next. There are rumors about that. Since this one, it's doing pretty well. It's sold, I think, over 1 million copies there, million units. So it's doing pretty decently there. Let me make sure I got the number right. Yeah. So it says here it sold over 1 million units within the first 24 hours of release. This game came out on August 28th. There, so it's doing pretty decently. Very nice there. So Sage gives Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater a peak there.
And you notice that is one down than I gave the original version. And
Yeah.
so there's I tried to be fair and be honest about the little flaws that I do think are there.
Okay. I mean, might as well give this a cinema since you say you're not going back to the original. Might as well give this a cinema
It's
there.
true, it's true, but like I said, I think it's important to say that the frame rate issues, performance, and just the way the game runs, it's like, guys, you should have had this fine day one.
Mm,
This structurally is a PlayStation 2 game. There's no excuse for this to not have like a perfect 60 frames per second at all times. There's no excuse to not have that.
All right. So there goes Sage there.